Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I guess you can add me to the list of people who on a personal level is flying this weekend. So on that level, I'm happy, I guess, about this. But is the message from this bill that people who lost their jobs because of the sequester, kids who got kicked out of Head Start, seniors who won't get Meals on Wheels, are less important than travelers who need to get to their destinations on time?
The message is awful. We are balled up in this ideological rigidity and excessive partisanship. And it's very hard to build consensus to do the common sense thing. And what you just said is the common sense thing. We shouldn't have a sequester in the first place.
Then why did everybody vote for it?
Because a year and a half ago, the government was going into default. And that's what the Republican House insisted on. And last March, the government was going into default again. And that's what the Republican House insisted on. And if we get out of this partisanship and ideological stances and do the common sense thing in moderation, what by far the vast majority of Americans want their government to work, they want people to work together. But you see what's going on, and if you hear frustration in my voice, it's real.
But doing this kind of ad hoc arrangement, does it make it less likely that the larger problem will get dealt with? That, in other words, this seems to some people like two things, frankly. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. People were complaining. And number two, senators and members of the House are all flying home this weekend. You got a week's vacation, so they did something about it.
You hit it on the head.
All right, let me talk to you about some other issues, and there's a lot going on. What's happening in Boston, particularly in the bombing case. This morning, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was moved from a hospital to a federal prison specializing in patients with medical issues. But we're also learning, Senator, that the Tsarnaev brothers talked about targeting New York City next. And let me play what Mayor Michael Bloomberg said yesterday.
The fact is, New York City remains a prime target for those who hate America and want to kill Americans. The attacks in Boston and the news that New York City was next on the terrorist list shows just how critical it is for the federal government to devote resources to high-risk areas.
You are on the Budget Committee, Senator. Are you concerned about the money available to deal with terrorism, or is the bigger problem the way that money is being spent, given the criticism, for example, about information sharing?
Of course I'm concerned, and the one part of the budget that is getting the increases, even with this idiot idea of a sequester, is the intelligence community. And I don't think you will see that will be cut back on.
You don't think it'll be cut back on? Do we need to look at the way that systems are organized right now and the way the money that there is spent?
Of course we do. But by and large, this was a system that worked. And the FBI and all law enforcement responded very well. And, you know, this stuff about Russia warned us. Well, we inquired of Russia several times, and Russia didn't respond. So the FBI and our intelligence community was all over this.
There are also a lot of questions this morning about Syria as well. You're on the Armed Services Committee, too. If a red line has been crossed when it comes to chemical weapons, well, I guess the first question is, do you think it has? But if it has, or when it is crossed, what action, if any, do you think the U.S. should take?
It probably has. We don't know the extent to which it has. But the fact is that he has chemical weapons and they're deployed. Now, what to do about it? That becomes a lot more complicated. First of all, we ought to do it in cooperation with our allies. And the immediate ones in the vicinity are Jordan, Turkey, and Israel. And then what we do is a lot more difficult. We're not going to put 75,000 boots on the ground. Will we go in and bomb? Well, what do you bomb? Do you bomb the planes that have the sarin on it so that you get a plume and then the wind carries it? It's a little more difficult. Maybe you bomb the runways and create craters so their planes can't take off. There's a lot of complications to this, Chris.
Well, and one of them obviously is the message that whatever we do sends to Iran, and whether our resolve to make sure that these governments are acting appropriately, whether it's Syria and chemical weapons or Iran and its nuclear programs, that there are consequences, that when we say this is not acceptable, we're willing to put some sort of action behind it.
Well, we have the resolve, but it's a little more complicated. There's a Syrian opposition, but there's a part of that opposition that is affiliated with al-Qaeda. And so what you want to do is to make sure the assistance that you're giving, and I think you'll see that forthcoming in much greater quantities now, but you want to make sure it gets to the right guys, not the wrong guys.
And let me ask you one final question, and it's something everybody is talking about. Are you running for governor in Florida?
No, ma'am, I have no intention. I've got my hands full as senator.
Are you ruling it out?
I said what I said.
Are you still considering it, Senator?
Look, I have no plans to run for governor. I have no intention of running for governor. I love this job as senator, except I am very, very frustrated, as we have discussed this morning, that we can't get anything done because you can't get people together to build consensus.
You know, as we're watching the number of Democrats who are walking away, and there seems to be some combination, Senator, of age, but also of frustration, do you think it's going to be harder to retain people in the Senate and in the House as well, and also to recruit talented people to be a part of it? Because
of the frustration, the answer to your question is yes. But, you know, I feel like I'm just getting cranked up. I'm going to give it everything I have and try to bring people together. Use the model of how we run the Aging Committee. I'm the chairman. The ranking Republican is Susan Collins. The two of us run the committee together. And that's the way the Senate ought to be run.
Senator Bill Nelson, it's always good to have a chance to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks, Chris.